What's up, guys, and welcome back to MoAn Inc. If you guys are new here, then hello. My name is Erica, and it is a pleasure to have you joining me today on the channel. Because for today's video, as you can see from the title, we are going to be summarizing and breaking down Sophocles' most famous play, titled Oedipus the King. But before we can get into that, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you know every single time I post in the future. And now that you've so kindly done that, let's get into the video. So, Oedipus, the play, opens with the staging, as it always does. And Sophocles tells us that the way the stage looks is right at the back, we have the palace of Thebes, and in the foreground, downstage, that's what it's called, there is an altar. Sophocles tells us that the play is set years and years after Oedipus has solved the riddle of the Sphinx and thus has, freed Thebes of this crux that this prison that the Sphinx had. Look, we're gonna get into it later, okay? So don't worry about it. But the whole point is that this is years and years after Oedipus has shown up. The Sphinx had a riddle. Oedipus solved the riddle. Boop, Sphinx disappears. And so Oedipus ascended to the throne. Okay, so he's very, very comfortably the king, is the whole purpose of that. The play technically opens with a procession. Okay, so the first people that we see are a procession who wander on stage, and they are all holding these branches that are covered in wool. They do a little walk, they end up at the altar, and they all leave these branches on the altar. And a priest among them is on his knees in front doing all of these prayers. Now, as this is happening, Oedipus sort of bounds out from the palace backstage, right? So there are these little doors, they open, he's like, boom! Very Cusco-esque, where he just kicks the door down. Not literally, that's not in the stage directions. In my head though, he does kick the doors down, but in Sophocles, he just comes out on stage and he says, I am Oedipus! He introduces himself to us, and then he immediately wants to know what all the people have gathered at this altar for. So he walks over to the priest, helps him to his feet, and asks for more details. And the priest tells us and Oedipus that there is a plague that is currently absolutely ravaging Thebes, okay? It is doing numbers at the moment, and people are dropping like flies. So they are there to pray at the altar in the hopes that they will either reach a god, or if not a god, right? So if they don't reach Apollo, who's the god of healing, then hopefully Oedipus can do something. Now, he does acknowledge, the priest does acknowledge, Oedipus is not obviously a god. He's not magical in any kind of way like that. However, he is the guy that solved the riddle, and so if he had the power to solve the riddle, then he might have the power to solve the plague. Luckily for the priest and for the people who are there, and the audience, right, because we're also there, Oedipus informs us that he is 10 steps ahead. Okay, so prior to the action, he has actually sent his brother-in-law, who's a guy called Creon, who we met in Antigone. I'm doing these out of order, but still. We met him in Antigone. Creon is Jocasta's brother, and Oedipus has sent him to Delphi already. So Creon left days ago, and actually they're now just waiting for him to come back, and hopefully the oracle will tell them exactly what to do and exactly how to act in order to absolve this plague, right? So everybody's kind of happy and they're all quite excited. And obviously, as soon as Oedipus says we're just waiting on Creon, the priest turns and looks off stage and he goes, well, speak of the devil, here Creon comes now. Creon runs on stage, and there is a bit of a back and forth between him and Oedipus, but the general gist of this conversation, it actually starts quite awkwardly because Oedipus wants to know exactly what has been said at Delphi, and Creon is trying to get Oedipus into the palace. He doesn't want to say everything out on stage. He wants it to be a private conversation, and Oedipus isn't really having it. He kind of is in this mindset of whatever you want to say can be said in front of my friends, can be said in front of the people. And Creon is continuously are you sure? Because we can have a private chat, it will be fine. Oedipus is just not about this. And so Creon tells the people, he tells Oedipus, he tells us exactly what the oracle told him. Long story short, years and years prior to this, there was a man called Laius who was the, not original king of Thebes, but the king prior to Oedipus. Okay, so he was the king of Thebes. He went to go to Delphi, and while he was on the way to Delphi, him and his posse end up getting attacked by thieves, hooligans, ruffians, right? They come out of the bushes and they kill basically everybody in this little entourage, okay? It is ugly, supposedly. What Creon tells us that it wasn't good, everybody heard about it, and everybody was killed by these thieves bar one guy. Okay, so there is one servant who managed to make it back, he managed to escape, and he's the one who told everybody about this murder and about this horrible, horrible scene that unfolded. So, what Creon tells us is that the plague will be lifted from the land as soon as they can figure out who this murderer was. Right? Because apparently the murderer is still in Thebes. This is the main piece of information that he found out, is that once they weed out which one of the Thebans killed the previous king, goodbye plague. Oedipus is quite shocked by this, not because he's like, oh, that's what we have to do. No, he's shocked because he's like, you're telling me that there was a murderer of the previous king and no one thought to investigate this just in case the lead thief, ruffian, hooligan came back here? Like, no one looked into that? And Creon tells us a really interesting piece of Theban lore for the purpose of this play, is that he says it was the Sphinx who actually told them that it wasn't worth looking into, that actually the people had sort of rallied together to be like, who's Laius's murderer? Laius is the king. And it was the Sphinx who said, don't worry about that. Just focus on what's at your feet currently. Oedipus, hearing this, is like, yeah, okay, fuck that. We're going to find who that guy is. He then tells the priest and the sort of procession posse, is what we're going to call them, to raise up their branches and to call up to the gods to aid them in this task. And whilst they do that, Oedipus, Creon, and a couple of the palace guards turn back and go off stage through the palace doors. The priest and everybody on stage has a moment of calling up. They do their prayers. After they do that, they then too file off stage. And now we have the introduction of our favorite element of Greek plays, the chorus. The chorus in Oedipus the King are specifically the Theban citizens who have not yet heard what Creon just said. Okay, so these are citizens who are not yet in the know. They have quite a long choral ode, but the essence of it is that they are, again, just kind of praying up to the gods, saying that the plague is really shit, everybody's dying, they hope that it stops. No, that's really it. I was going to say a couple of points, but that's essentially what the whole thing is. They just say it in a lot more poetic ways as you read through it. But really, they're just saying, please, for the love of God, save us. When Oedipus reemerges on stage, it says in the stage directions that he is addressing the chorus as if he is addressing the entire city. Okay, so that's pretty important, that he is talking not only to the chorus that are on stage, but essentially, we can think of ourselves as the audience if you're actually sitting there. They've gathered the entire city, and as king, he's addressing everyone. Oedipus tells us that there is a murderer among them in Thebes, but good news is that once they catch this murderer, the plague will be gone. Now, because Oedipus was not literally in Thebes when this whole murder happened, because Oedipus came after that episode, right? So in the Theban timeline, Laius gets killed and then Oedipus shows up after, he solves the riddle, becomes king, right? So when he's telling everybody all of this information, as soon as we find the murderer, all this kind of stuff, blah, 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 he says, because I wasn't around at the time, I'm talking essentially out of my arse. I don't really know what happened at the time. I wasn't there. I don't know how you guys reacted to it. So therefore, I can only do so much for this investigation. But if anybody in here knows something, now is your time to speak up, okay? We need to help everybody here. We need to band together as a city. So if you know something, let's hear it. And unfortunately, no one steps up. Not a soul. He does question the audience a few more times, asking if anybody has any more details maybe from the time. So did they hear that actually the guy is in Thebes, but he's not Theban? Then speak up and at least say that detail. No one does. He asked if anybody is, covering for themselves or covering for a friend, because now is the time for them to come clean and to be like, it was me. But no one does, which I don't know why I was surprised by that. Of course, no one was going to be like, oh God, if you hadn't asked that question, I wouldn't have come forward. But since you did, it is I. Come on. Oedipus keeps asking questions. Nobody really replies. And he just says, if I find out that any of you did know something and you didn't come forward, you are in mega trouble. And as a final line to everybody, he says that if nobody else will, then he will fight for justice in honor of Laius, as if he were fighting for his own father. Jesus fucking Christ. When you know this play and then you go back and you read it, it's just, oh my God. This is when the chorus leader decides to step forward, and he actually suggests to Oedipus that since none of them know anything, they should ask Tiresias, who is a blind Theban seer or prophet, right? So he is very, very famous amongst this sort of Theban cycle of mythology. He also pops up in the Odyssey, actually, Tiresias. So he's a very famous character. And that's what the chorus leader suggests, right? He says, since none of us know anything, let's give, Tiresias a bell. He can show up and he can tell us at least what Apollo has told him. And it's probably a little bit more than what we know now. But Oedipus, much like before where he was ahead of the game with Creon, he's ahead of the game now. And he looks to the chorus leader and he's like, Creon actually previously suggested this. So we have asked guards and attendants to go and find Tiresias, and they are bringing him here now. But in response to this, the chorus leader says, goody, because without Tiresias, we would just have to rely on rumors about what happened that day and about what we're supposed to do in finding the murderer. And Oedipus hears this and he's like, what rumors? What don't I know? The only thing that we hear from the chorus leader is that apparently the rumor is the murderer of Laius was a traveler. So he was not technically a thief or a ruffian or whatever. He was just a random traveler on the road. And before we can hear any more about this, boom, enter Tiresias. Tiresias comes on stage and he is led, because he's blind, by a young man or a boy, right? So he's sort of led on stage, and when he gets to center stage, Oedipus addresses him and asks him what he knows, what the gods can tell them, because it's Tiresias, what they can be told about this plague on Thebes, what they can do about this murderer, etc., etc., right? So that's how he opens it, by just asking all these questions. And Tiresias immediately hears this and is like, you know what? Send me away. I actually don't want to have this conversation with you. It's just not happening. Oedipus begs him, okay? Begs him to tell them anything that they can do in order to help the people of Thebes. And Tiresias is adamant that he will not say a word. He really, really does not want to have this conversation with Oedipus whatsoever. And what unfolds in this scene is one of the craziest arguments between these two men, just because Oedipus has such anger management problems, and really we see him go from being like, oh, tell us how we can help the people, tell us this, tell us that, to as soon as Tiresias won't say the information that he wants him to, he just flips. It's just like this horrifyingly quick switch, where Oedipus goes from being nice to then calling Tiresias a fraud at one point. He calls him a scheming quack. Oh yeah, that's a highlight. He also calls him scum of the earth for not sharing this information with him as king, but also in order to help the people of Thebes, right? So there are lots of insults that are being thrown Tiresias' way. Oedipus is also so mad that he accuses Creon of putting Tiresias up to this. So because Creon is the one that had to go and get Tiresias, because Creon is just sort of acting like Oedipus's bitch, really, in this play. He accuses that Creon has sent him with these false, not prophecies, but these sort of false words that Tiresias is saying just to annoy Oedipus. And so he kind of drags Creon into this as well by basically being like, well, if you won't tell me things, maybe it's not because you won't tell me, but maybe it's because Creon has put you up to saying false things just to piss me off and just to piss the people off. And Tiresias does start the conversation by remaining calm. He does a lot of hey, you can be as angry as you want to, but I'm not having this conversation with you because you're not ready to hear this. I don't think it's going to be beneficial, all of this kind of stuff. And it basically, as it goes on, Tiresias gets increasingly more mad, but his anger is not like Oedipus's. Oedipus is just throwing insults, and Tiresias is slowly telling us this horrifying information, just one line at a time. For instance, one of the first things he says to Oedipus is that even if he doesn't tell him, what's going to happen is going to happen, and the information will come to light. So he doesn't need to divulge this information. And as Oedipus keeps, poking at him, Tiresias starts saying things like, okay, well, there's somebody who's already here, somebody that is close to you. All of this kind of weird stuff that is just not exclusive, but is enough to make Oedipus angry, that clearly he knows that Tiresias knows what's going on. And as Oedipus gets increasingly more angry, one of the things that he does to Tiresias is he starts making fun of the fact that Tiresias is blind. Right, so he basically just starts saying, because you're blind, how do we really know that you can even see things, blah, 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 the gods just pity you, maybe you're just crazy, maybe you're just a scheming quack or a fraud, that kind of a stuff. And Tiresias turns to him at one point, and this is when Tiresias not snaps to the same degree as Oedipus, but he's had it up to here with Oedipus just being pissed off. And he says, I may be blind, but at least I'm not blind to my real life. I am not blind to my reality. You don't even know who your real parents are. And literally you're reading this like, oh, there it is. Oedipus does not clock onto this though immediately. And so as the conversation unfolds, Tiresias is telling us a little bit more about Oedipus, where he says that once Oedipus learns the truth of his marriage, that's going to be like a real treat for everybody to be around for. Oedipus doesn't know what this means. He also says that once Oedipus knows the reality of who his parents truly are, he doesn't say it's going to destroy him, but he does kind of say we're in for like a ride. And it's really these two things, as they keep getting repeated, that catch Oedipus off guard. That he kind of turns Tiresias and he's like, wait, what about my parents? And when Oedipus kind of has this like lull in his anger, that's when Tiresias like comes back with his sense and he's like, nothing, no one, it's fine, it's okay, you'll figure it out later. In fact, he literally turns to his attendants and he's like, take me away, I'm done with this, we're not doing this, I said too much. The last thing he says before he leaves is that he just very quietly and solemnly looks at Oedipus and he says, the person that you are seeking is here and he will have no joy in finding out that he is the one. Now, in a quick switcheroo, Oedipus actually exits, right? So he walks back into the palace and Tiresias is left on the corner of the stage alone, right? Well, like with his attendant. He's left there. And he turns to the audience and he tells us, hey, everything that I was alluding to, this is what I meant. So we hear from Tiresias that Oedipus is the guy who killed his dad, who was Laius, and then he married his mother. So Jocasta is Oedipus's mother, and now they have kids. So there's that. I just imagine if you're watching this for the first time and you don't know the story, you've got to hit this point in the play because we're not halfway through and you're like, what the fuck am I sitting through? And literally after dropping that truth bomb of just like, here's all the incest of this play that you're currently enjoying, I guess, or like you're at least watching, he then leaves. And so we're left with a blank stage and trauma is what we're left with. To break this, the chorus come on and they essentially sing, well, that got dark really quick. Let's lighten this thing up with a song. And they sing this long thing where they sing up to Zeus and Apollo and they're basically just really confused about what's gone on. So are we, to be fair. Again, if you don't know the story, you're going to be like, huh, what? So we're all very confused, but they're singing about it. And then as they come to the end of their ode, we then have Creon. Creon comes back on stage. Now, when Creon comes on stage, he has heard that Oedipus has suggested that he sent Tiresias to give false prophecies, which is like not a thing. Okay, like this is not a good thing. He does not want this to be attached to his name or even come close to tarnishing his reputation. So he comes on and basically says, I've heard that Oedipus just said these things about me and there is nothing worse than being branded any kind of traitor. The chorus leader though, who is there, he kind of steps forward and he says, I just think that Oedipus was really mad in the moment. I don't think that he really meant it. He was just frustrated by Tiresias, like I wouldn't worry too much about it. And Creon is like, but he did literally say that I had sent a false prophet with like false prophecies. And the leader is like, well, yeah, like he did, those words did come out of his mouth. Now, as this conversation is happening, boom, back doors open, doors to the palace open, and out walks Oedipus. And when Creon turns to confront him about this and is like, why are we dragging my name into this? Like, why? Oedipus is super defensive, as you can probably guess. This conversation, although it starts off as being about Creon, it really divulges into Oedipus continuing to question Creon about the murder itself, right? So he wants to know what the investigation was way back when, but also how Tiresias kind of fits into this puzzle, because Tiresias seems to think it has something to do with Oedipus. And obviously when the conversation turns in this way, Creon is just standing there like, I have no idea how you are linked to this whatsoever. The whole problem here is really that Oedipus has internalized that it must be Tiresias and Creon ganging up against him, right? So they have basically tried to oust Oedipus from his position so that Creon can take over. That is what we hear in this conversation, that he has gone back into the palace after talking to Tiresias and has been like, it must be Creon. Like, Creon must be doing this because he wants to be king. So throughout the rest of this conversation, we really have Creon unpacking that and saying, I have zero interest in being king. And he lists off all the reasons why he doesn't want to be king, why that's too much responsibility, why he doesn't think that he'd be good for the job as well. And so he basically is like, I understand why you might think that initially, but I literally do not want anything to do with your position. Like, it's great that you have it. You can keep it. I just want to figure out who the murderer is so that we can get rid of the plague. And to prove to Oedipus that he has no interest in taking the throne from his now brother-in-law, he suggests to the king, to Oedipus, that he himself can go back to Delphi to have a conversation with the oracle there. Oedipus, though, still has his guard up. He still is not totally convinced. So Creon asks him, what can I do? Like, what is going to make you trust me? Do you have to banish me? Do I have to be ousted from Thebes? Like, is it now so ingrained in your head that nothing that I do or say is going to help this? Or like, can we move forward from this? Can we just like forget that it ever happened and actually get back to the problem that we are currently facing? Oedipus replies, and he's just like, no, I don't want to banish you, actually. I would prefer it if we killed you, so that way I know that you're not trying to take the throne from me. And just as Creon is processing this and is like, my brother-in-law is insane. Luckily for us, Jocasta, who's the queen, who's Oedipus's wife, and Creon's sister, emerges from the stage. And we are not the only people, along with Creon, who are like, thank God she's come in. But also the chorus leader is like, fee you! Great timing, Jay. Jocasta's entry into the play is iconic. She just walks out of the palace and she goes, hey, all of you are being really, really loud. And I need you to shut the fuck up because we can hear you from inside. What a boss. What a boss. In response to her, the men just basically start going, but he's being mean to me. Oh, Creon said this. Why Oedipus said this? And Jocasta doesn't want to listen to any of this. And so she just says, Creon said that he did not do what you were accusing him of doing. Just believe him. I believe him. This is my brother. Done. Do it for me. Even if you don't believe it, do it for me. That way we can all shut up and move on. The chorus then in the background begin to chant, believe him, believe him, believe him. I know this is a tragedy, but it's just such a silly scene because it really gives two kids on the playground who are like in a circle and they're like about to fight and the teacher comes out just as they're about to fight and the teacher is like, hey, this is just like playtime, you're not supposed to be fighting. And the kids are like, well, I didn't start it. But then all the kids around them are like chanting. Like that's the vibe of this scene. In case you guys needed a visual, it is very much giving little like 8-year-olds on the playground. And after this chanting, Oedipus then says, fine, but if he brings about my downfall, then I just pity everybody else because then I won't be here to protect you because I actually knew that he was being mean to me and none of you believed it. And so therefore you might be left alone and that would really suck. Creon just tells Oedipus that he's still wrong, says that he's basically paranoid, and he walks off stage. Jocasta does, by the way, throughout the scene, tell Creon just to go home to like separate the two of them. So Creon doesn't stomp off like randomly. He stomps off because Jocasta periodically is like, Creon, just go home. Just leave, just go home. He's mad, you're mad, blow off some steam elsewhere. And that is why he exits. The best thing is that with Creon gone, Jocasta, like a true teacher, right, she turns to the chorus and she's like, okay, now that he's gone, I want to know what really happened here today. Okay, you guys were watching what really happened. And the chorus beg her, like beg her not to go over it. They're like, please, for the love of sweet baby Jesus, can we not? They just reaffirm their loyalty to Oedipus, who is the king. They basically say they'll do anything for him. And then they exit the stage as well. So we are just left with Jocasta and Oedipus alone on stage. Jocasta asks Oedipus, since nobody has answered her, what exactly went down. And Oedipus just fills her in on the fact that he thinks that Creon has put Tiresias up to accusing him because he was told that he was involved in the murder, some way, somehow. And Jocasta, naturally, is like, how would he know that you had anything to do with it anyways? Jocasta goes so far to kind of not outwardly denounce, but question prophets in general. And she tells us the story that happened way back when a prophet came to visit her and Laius, who was king at the time. And this prophet told Laius that at some point in the future, their son would kill Laius. And she basically uses this as an example to be like, well, that didn't happen because when we did have a son, we actually bound his ankles and then we left him on the mountainside to die. And the people who killed my previous husband, my ex-husband, my late husband, that's the term I was looking for. The people who actually did that were the ruffians, the hooligans, the thieves, right? So prophets don't really know necessarily what they're talking about. Now, this story is supposed to be comforting, right? It's supposed to be her basically saying, seers are seers, prophets are prophets. Sometimes they just say things. Except As she told the story, Oedipus perks up at one particular detail. And that is when Jocasta is talking about the reports of her husband's murder, he notices that she mentions he was killed, like Laius was killed, at this intersection of these 3 different roads. Okay, so there's this crossroads at one point, and that is where Laius had got to and where he was killed. And Oedipus really zeroes in on this, and he turns to his wife and he's like, I'm sorry, did you just say that it was at a crossroads of 3 roads? And Jocasta is like, yeah. Oedipus wants to know exactly where this crossover is. We do have that written in the text, so we do know these exact roads. One's coming from Delphi, one's Phocis, and one is, oh gosh, did I write this down? Yes, Daulia. Wherever that is. Okay, so this is sort of the passageway of the 3 roads. And Oedipus is like really gung-ho about trying to figure out what time this happened, what time of day this happened, what the details were of the report, if these are the 3 roads that were described. Oedipus is getting more and more tentative throughout this conversation. And he asks of the one person who survived this attack, which we've heard about before, he asked if that person is still in Thebes and is still in the palace, enough that they can call on him. And so Jocasta's like, yeah, I mean, he's pretty old. All of this happened around the time that you showed up. So this is now, I mean, he has like young kids. So I'm trying to think of like how old Oedipus would be, because Antigone and Ismene are like described as being young. So they're probably like, what, 9-ish, I want to say Antigone probably is. And then we've got the older boys who are described as men later on. I don't know. So this is like 20 years ago, basically. So that's essentially what Jocasta is saying to us, that she's like, this was a while ago. I can call him forward. I don't know how much more detail he's going to remember, though. Jocasta, though, wants to know why Oedipus is so gung-ho about talking to the servant. And Oedipus unloads all of this Oedipus lore, that's what we're going to call it, on us. And his life story, essentially, that he tells us and he tells Jocasta, is that his parents are the king and queen of Corinth. Therefore, he grew up as the prince of Corinth. Now, he never thought anything about this, like literally never questioned it. I mean, why would you? Until one day where he was at this giant banquet and there's this drunk guy who stands up and he yells and points at Oedipus and says that his father is not his real father. So this obviously jolts Oedipus. He's old enough to, understand what the man is saying. He turns to his dad and his mother in private and asks them. And they're really, really mad about this. Okay, the parents are like, how could he say such a thing? It was so disrespectful. He's just drunk, like all of this kind of stuff. And that's okay for Oedipus for a little bit. But he tells us that over time, this thing is like gnawing at him. Okay, he cannot get it out of his head. Like, why would anybody say that if there wasn't at least the tiniest bit of truth to it? That is what spurred him to go to Delphi. And when he went to Delphi, he meets with the oracle, and the oracle tells him that it was his destiny to kill his father and to couple, really unfortunate that that's the word that's used, but it's there in the Greek, couple with his mother. Okay, and obviously Oedipus hears this and he is so disgusted by it. He's like, oh, absolutely not in my future. No way. As he's leaving Delphi, Oedipus decides that he is going to abandon Corinth entirely, right? He does not want to put his parents through that. And so therefore he, decides to leave. And when he leaves, he just starts traveling in a different direction. And he tells Jocasta that as he was doing this little traveling bit, he comes to this crossway that Jocasta has described. And when he gets there, long story short, as we've seen, Oedipus has a very quick temper, and it's him, and he comes face to face with these guys on the road. These guys on the road are like, hey, you gotta move out of the way because we were here first, all of this kind of stuff. And Oedipus just gets really, really mad. And so he jumps out and he kills everybody, like on the other side of the road. That's the story. And obviously, as he was listening to Jocasta, and as he's understanding all of these prophecies, he then is like, oh my God, I killed Laius. I am the abomination. I am the curse on the land. And therefore I am the plague. And even though he's come to this conclusion himself, even though Oedipus has figured all of this out to a certain degree, we haven't got to the final nail in the coffin, but he's pretty much put all of these pieces together. He still says that he wants to talk to the servant who made it back, right? The guy who survived from this whole road rage incident. He still wants to talk to him just to confirm everything, right? So he's still asked to send for this guy. Jocasta, though, is not convinced that Oedipus's story is right. And so she says that the two of them can go, they can go find the servant and they can talk to him together. And so they exit the stage through the palace doors. And on come dancing the chorus. They have another very long ode, which is essentially just about like pride and ego and prophecies and that kind of stuff. So if you want to read all of that, you can just find that in the play. There's no new information. They're just sort of bringing forward the themes of what we've just heard. Really, that's what the chorus always do. But anyways, once the chorus have finished singing, then Jocasta comes back out from the palace. And this time she's holding a branch of her own, which is covered in wool. And she goes to the altar to go and leave it like at the altar, right? And she updates us and she basically says that Oedipus is not handling this information well. Okay, he's pretty set on what he thinks, and therefore she's now out here raising up prayers to the gods because she's like, someone's got to help us. And as she's doing this, we actually have a herdsman come on stage. Now, this is not the person that they have sent for in the servant, okay? So just to clarify, and it does say this in the stage directions, that when the herdsman comes on, it is not the person they have called. Instead, this herdsman is a messenger from Corinth. The herdsman messenger from Corinth tells Jocasta that he's there because he's looking for Oedipus. Reason being, Oedipus's dad in Corinth, so the king of Corinth, whoever he is, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, he has died. Okay, so he's like, I've come to tell Oedipus because Oedipus is the rightful king of Corinth. The people are asking for him. His dad is dead. Where is he? And Jocasta is like, oh, let me go get him. She goes and she gets Oedipus to come out. The messenger repeats the sword to Oedipus, and this starts to get Oedipus thinking a little bit more highly of himself, luckily, for the brief moment of this play anyways. And we hear that actually his dad in Corinth died of sickness. And Oedipus was like, maybe the prophecy that I heard about like, my dad is gonna die, maybe I kill him in my absence, kind of a thing. And so maybe the prophecy is coming true, but it is back in Corinth. Like, maybe I just overreacted about everything. However, he does remember that the prophecy involves him marrying his mother. And so he does say to the herdsman, I'm still not going back to Corinth because my mother is still alive. And the prophecy said that I would marry my mother. And so we're like not gonna do that. Great to hear that dad died of just like a sickness, right? It's not like he was murdered or anything like that. But I'm also still staying out of this. The messenger, the herdsman, mightily confused by this, right? He's got no idea what this prophecy is that they're speaking of. And so Jocasta and Oedipus explain again everything that we've discussed about Oedipus going to Delphi and hearing this horrible prophecy, etc., etc. And the herdsman messenger reels on them and is like, guys, don't worry about this weird prophecy about you marrying your mother. Oedipus, you can come back to Corinth. It's not a big deal because your parents aren't actually your parents, and therefore it doesn't apply. Good news. Obviously, Oedipus and Jocasta don't think this is good news. They are absolutely horrified by this. So they're like, we need more details. What do you know that we clearly don't? The herdsman, messenger, he tells us the backstory of how Oedipus got to Corinth as a baby. And this is where the play, it just goes like downhill really quickly from here, because he's like, I actually found baby Oedipus and I gave him to the king and queen of Corinth. Now, long story short, very long explanation short, because we do a lot of this like asking particular questions to get particular answers. But essentially he tells us that when he was a shepherd out on the mountainside, he was out there one time and this servant shows up to leave a baby with bound ankles on the side of the mountain to just like die. And he goes up to the guy and basically the servant says, I don't know if I can do this really. This is just a poor innocent child. I'm going to hand this over to you. So I've kind of done half of my job essentially. And so then he leaves. And through that, then this herdsman, this messenger who's talking to them says that he then went back to Corinth. He then gave the baby to the king and queen and they just raised him like he was their own. And when it's inquired further, we hear that this servant said that he was the servant of like some king. Oh God, what was the king's name? Oh, that's right, Laius. He was the servant of this king Laius, and he had this baby, and he said that the king and queen didn't want this baby anymore, and so he was gonna just chuck it out, and that's why he took the baby and gave him to the king and queen of Corinth. And in fact, it was also this servant who gave Oedipus his name because of the bounding of the ankles. So because of that, Oedipus in Greek actually means swollen foot. And so therefore, this servant gave the baby the name, told the herdsman messenger the baby's name, and then he gave that name to the king and queen of Corinth. I've just made this a lot more confusing than what it needed to be, but hopefully you followed that. Now, when we are reading this scene, I always think, considering this was like 20 years ago, this man has an impeccable memory. I am always thinking every time I get to this scene, wow, I wish that I could recount things like this. Like, he's like, I remember what the guy looked like. I remember what the guy was called. I remember where I was that day. I mean, maybe he's only ever found the one baby. I would assume he only found the one baby on a mountainside, so maybe that's why it's stuck in his brain. But still, not the point of this scene. This is just what goes on in my head when I'm reading Oedipus. Anyways, Jocasta, hearing all of this, she is internally not handling this well. Okay, so the stage directions are that she immediately whirls away from everybody. She's got a lot of things locked up in here that she's going, oh, fuck. And Oedipus wants to inquire more about this. So he keeps trying to ask Jocasta questions, and Jocasta is just pleading like more and more rapidly, stop asking questions. You don't want to know the answer to these. Like, don't push any further, Oedipus. Just leave it. Just leave it as it is. We don't need to go any further than this. You are fine. We are fine. We know as much as we need to know. And by the end of this, Jocasta is so overwhelmed by the bombardment of questions that she just flings herself back into the palace. She just needs to get away from everything. And so she runs inside and slams the doors. Once Jocasta is gone, we then have the attendants or the guards finally bring on this mysterious servant that we've been hearing so much about. Okay, they track him down and they bring him, and he's described as coming to Oedipus reluctantly. Okay, he's now a shepherd and he is very reluctant to approach the king. He knows what this is about, and we are told specifically that he is not happy to be there. He confirms who he is though, says that he is the guy they're looking for. He was one of Laius's men. He was there that day. He did do X, Y, Z. Like, he basically is just saying, yes, 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 I am exactly who you're looking for. But this was so long ago, I don't really remember all the details. I'm sorry, I'm old now. Maybe we shouldn't do this, like, ever. He is so reluctant to talk to Oedipus. He just kind of darts around all of Oedipus's questions. The only ones he will answer are who he is. So when Oedipus is trying to hammer in, being like, hey, we just spoke to this guy, we were looking for this person, da-da-da, all this kind of stuff, he does confirm his identity. But then when Oedipus starts saying, okay, let's now pull it back, like 20 years, or however many years it's been. I'm just guessing it's been 20 years. But still, he says, let's pull this back. And that is when the shepherd is like, that was so long ago. I just don't remember anything. I'm so sorry. I don't remember any of the details. I'ma head out. And when he tries to dance around this topic, actually Oedipus has had it up to his eyeballs with everyone, that he gets one of his guards to seize this man and sort of like hold him in like a torture position. That's like really aggressive. He just seizes him, he holds him uncomfortably, and they make him talk. Through this conversation, he not only confirms his identity, as we've just heard, but he also confirms that he was the one to bring the baby to the mountainside because Jocasta, Oedipus's wife, gave him the baby. Okay, so this is the new piece of information that we have. And Oedipus is like, what do you mean my wife gave you the baby? He explains that she had recently received a prophecy about her son. She had just given birth to a son, so she gave the baby to him to go and kill him on the mountainside or just outside of the city because she is so... what is the word I'm looking for? Superstitious. That's it. So she's so superstitious that she wanted this baby to be killed. But he tells us, this shepherd says that he couldn't do it. He was like, that I couldn't kill an innocent child. That's just not what I was about. And so I come out, I'm going to just leave it there. Like, I'm not actually going to kill it. And then I run into that herdsman and he's very happy to take the baby so that I have done my job and taken the baby away from Thebes, but I'm now not a baby murderer. Oedipus, though, hearing this, matches this up to the story that we just heard, and he's like, are you kidding? And when all of the cogs are turning in this poor man's head, when he figures out exactly what's happened in order for this prophecy thing to come true, in order for this plague, in order for Tiresias' words to make sense, everybody on stage is like, we're just gonna melt into the background. And on that note, everybody exits the stage. So we end up having the chorus come on to sing an ode. And this ode, remember how at the start of this I said, oh, when it comes to the Sphinx, we'll hear about it later. We hear about it now. This is where the chorus tell us the story of the Sphinx and the riddle and how Oedipus came and it was such a bright day for Thebes that they were finally freed of this curse, of this prison. And like they thought it was really great and now they're like, turns out was a shit show from the beginning. We were fooled. And with that, once they finish the ode, we then have a messenger run on from inside the palace, right? So we have this new messenger open the doors and he runs on stage and he's like, hey guys, you know how it's been really dark up until this point and we found out all of this horrible stuff. Do you remember how we had this character Jocasta who like left because she was really overwhelmed by everything that's coming out? She's dead. And before you guys who are at home reading this being like, okay, so now we're at the end of the play, there's still like one little tidbit because the chorus are then like, oh my God, what happened? Right? We need like an explanation of what happened. So he explains that Jocasta, she was like wailing when she came in from when we last saw her when she was on stage. She goes into the palace, she was wailing, she was overwhelmed. Very long story short, she hangs herself, right? Lovely uplifting at the end of Sophocles' Oedipus the King. She hung herself because she just could not deal with the fact that she had had 4 children with her son. So he explains that, and then he says that Oedipus then came rushing into the palace, like right after, and he tries to go and find his wife, his mum. He tries to go and talk to her, but it's too late, so he actually bounds into her private chambers, and when he gets in there, she's already hung, and instead of Oedipus trying to get her down or anything like that, I really should have put a trigger warning at the start of this video, but alas, he goes over to her and takes the pins from her dress and he stabs his eyes multiple times because he is so disgusted by what he's done and the grossness of everything and the prophecy that came true that he can't bear to see his life anymore, but also death would be easier for him. And so therefore he does it like multiple times. I have a quote. The messenger says, and at each stroke, blood spurts from the roots, slashing his beard, a swirl of it, nerves and clots, black hail of blood, pulsing, gushing down. The chorus just say, holy fuck, is he okay now? Obviously that's not a direct quote, but that's like a summary of what the Greek should have said, in my opinion. And after they ask this, they can hear wailing from inside the palace. So the messenger is like, well, given that's him, I'm going to say no. And if you thought this couldn't get any worse, right now, blind Oedipus comes on stage. Yeah, he opens the doors to the palace and he comes on and he has a whole like apocalypse now moment where he like staggers onto the stage, remember blind. And so he's got like blood on his face as we've heard like the description of it. And he's like, the horror. And Oedipus verbalizes that since his eyes were pretty useless to him, since it couldn't show him what his life really was, that's why he stabbed them out, because he was like, they didn't help me up until this point, so I don't need them. And now he wants to be taken away from Thebes as his final punishment. He doesn't want to be killed. He knows that death would be easier for him and he deserves to suffer, in his personal opinion. But as the chorus and Oedipus are having this back and forth, Creon comes back on stage and he is apologized to by Oedipus, first and foremost. Oedipus says that he's sorry and he was wrong. He shouldn't have accused Creon of anything because Oedipus, is the plague. Creon was just trying to bring all of this to light. He was just trying to be a good Samaritan. He's not trying to be king. I don't think anybody would wish this upon him. And so therefore, he's sorry. Oedipus really wants to be punished. So he's not doing anything by, like, he stabbed his own eyes out, but he wants everything else to be from other people because he feels like he deserves it. And Creon is like, I will oust you from the city, but I'm only going to do that after I consult the gods just to like make sure that that's what we're supposed to do because of all of the fuckery that we are currently involved in. So just hold off for like 5 seconds and I'll get back to you. In light of this, Oedipus starts saying his goodbyes and he asks Creon to bury his wife or his mum. He wants Jocasta to be buried, whether we decide to say that she's his mum first and his wife second, or his wife first and his mum second. Regardless, he wants her to be buried because she's still hanging in the bedroom. So he's like, bury her, that would be great. But he also asks that Creon leave his sons alone, right? So this is when I was saying, I don't really know how long ago this was. It doesn't tell us the exact years, but we do know from this moment that Oedipus and Jocasta's 2 sons are actually men now. They are old enough. So he asked them to kind of be left alone. He's like, these two men will be able to handle themselves. They can handle Thebes if you allow them to stay. They would be great rulers, that kind of a thing. But they are men now, so they can handle the world. However, he does have 2 daughters, and they are too young. And therefore, he asks Creon to take care of his daughters Antigone and Ismene. Creon agrees to this, and then Oedipus pushes one step further and says, thank you so much for agreeing to that. Can I see them and say goodbye to them one last time? And Creon grants this. So a little Antigone and Ismene, as like teeny tiny girls, are brought on stage to come face to face with their now blind half brother, but dad. And when they're brought before Oedipus, he decides that he's going to tell them about the incest, which is a choice, right? He decides that now his last gift to his daughters will be knowledge of the fact that he fucked his mum and that's how they were born. So there's that. But also, and most importantly, he is actually bringing this up. Oedipus is really bringing this up because he's saying that because he did this, unfortunately, they're kind of screwed for like the rest of their life, because he's like, what man will marry you? Knowing that this is the history of your family, knowing that this is where you come from, that this is the generational curse that is now within you, you're probably going to be single for the rest of your lives. I mean, not the time. Like, just not the time. In fact, I wrote down this exact quote so that I could share it with you guys, just so that you can see I'm not even over-exaggerating that, okay? Oedipus says, who will marry you then? Not a man on earth. Your doom is clear. You'll wither away to nothing, single, without a child. I mean, holy fuck, Oedipus. But he then wraps it up by essentially asking Creon to take pity on the girls, and he will pray, and he wants everybody to pray that they will have a better life than his. And when he asks Creon again to now send him out of the city, Creon reiterates what we heard him say at the start of this interaction, which is that he can't do that until the gods confirm that that's the right thing. And so he actually tries to redirect Oedipus back into the palace, because he's like, I told you once, I'm going to stick to this. I don't know if this is the right thing to do. We have to wait for what the gods say. Why don't you sit down in your house whilst we wait? We can all be comfy. And as Creon is saying this, he's trying to take Antigone and Ismene away from Oedipus. And Oedipus is not handling this well. He's trying to give his daughters like the last sort of cuddle. He's like, no, don't take them from me. But the gods still wrench the girls loose from Oedipus's grasp, and they take them off stage, which is absolutely heartbreaking. But luckily for you guys who are tired at this point by all of this very, very quick tragedy at the end, because it really does just hit you like one thing after the other. Sophocles is very, very good at this. Luckily for you guys, we are now at the end of the play, because this final interaction is Creon saying to Oedipus, your power as king, as ruler, as a member of Thebes ends here. That is not a direct quote, but that is essentially what he says. And then the pair go into the palace. And when the doors close at the back of the stage, the chorus come on to say a final few lines before the curtains, so to speak, are drawn, and we are left with the end of Oedipus the king. So thank you guys so much for watching MoAn Inc, and I'll be seeing you next week with more Sophocles videos. I'll see you guys then.